Hi, everyone, and welcome to this Mobile Christian Network Zoom conversation with Dr. Denisa Davidson. With me is my friend and my colleague, Tina Fain, and I'm Shalini. So before we start, I wanted to share a little bit more about our expert guest, Dr. Davidson. Dr. Davidson did her medical training in India and in New Zealand. She's a fellow of the Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Psychiatrists. She's also certified in advanced training in child and adolescent psychiatry, as well as the neurosequential model training at the phase 2 level. Dr. Davidson's articles have been published in journals and magazines. She has a blog, and it is called Con on the Cob site. And if you want to follow her on Twitter, her Twitter handle is at Denisa Davidson. That's Dennisa Davidson. Dr. Denisa has worked with numerous adults and children going through post-traumatic stress. And she has helped me and my daughter when we were diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress. She's currently practicing in Auckland, New Zealand. I will start with the first question and then we can go around. So, Dr. Davidson, first of all, I was wondering if you could just help us understand what is post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress disorder?
We go through life experiences which can be really hard, and we can go through it at different life stages. When we go through these life experiences that are really difficult, the way we get through them is to kind of find a way to make sense of them. That's called processing, and then move forward through them. Sometimes these experiences can be so hard that it is difficult for our brain to bring it to higher centers that actually do the processing. So what happens is the memories, the experience gets stuck in the lower part of the brain pretty much as they happen. And therefore, they start to give us difficulties with our day-to-day function. That is essentially what is post-traumatic stress disorder.
Would you explain that a little bit more when you say it gets stuck in our brain?
So what happens is, say, for example, somebody was crossing a road and got into a traffic accident. That can be quite a powerful memory that happened in their life, a powerful incident which caused quite an intense memory. For some people, over time, they are able to kind of put that memory, in context, and they can remember it, but they don't keep feeling the fear of that incident every time they remember it. And they heal over the period of next few weeks or months. But for some people, that doesn't happen. For some people, what happens is the whole memory with all the emotions linked to it, the fear, everything just gets etched in their brain as it was. And every time they see a car, or they are at a road crossing, or they see the news article about an accident, the whole memory can come like a picture with all the emotions that they felt at the same time. Sometimes it can almost make them feel like they are living through it all over again. That can be really scary. So what they end up doing is they may avoid getting into cars, they may avoid going to car parks, they may avoid being alone on the road, and it starts to affect the way they function. It can be really hard to control what's going on because the part of the brain where these things work is not in our higher brain, where we do the thinking and planning and controlling. It happens from the lower brain, which runs on its own pretty much. What that means is when this person who's having difficulties with those memories is suddenly if they see a car, their heart may start to race. Their breathing can change. Their blood pressure can change. The way they feel inside of their body can drastically change, and it can change very quickly. Sometimes they may be living in constant fear that, oh, what if I have to get into a car? What if I have to? So at baseline, their stress can be high as well. It can start to cause problems with their sleep. They may be scared to go to sleep and have trouble falling asleep. They may get nightmares in their dreams when they fall asleep. Sometimes they may just wake up in the middle of the night feeling really scared and have trouble going back to sleep. As time goes on, if they are still struggling to heal, they will be struggling to function. So little day-to-day things can become hard. Doing things at work can become hard, or doing things at university can become hard, because sometimes they may be wanting to do something, but their mind goes off somewhere else, to the memory, or just go blank. Sometimes they can feel quite restless inside and seem to keep doing something so that their mind is occupied by other things and not the difficult memories. This can make life really hard. And if if there hasn't been something done to help them to get through this, then they may start to feel, I'm struggling so much. How can I do this? Is my life really worth living? Well, they may also start to wonder, am I damaged somehow? Over time, it can affect not only our mental health, but also our physical health, because these things affect the brain, and our brain is what controls just about everything that happens both in our mind and in our body. Does that kind of help understand?
Very much.
So I would like to answer the second question. What symptoms does people with post-traumatic stress disorder might have?
It is very much similar to what I was doing when I was explaining about somebody going through a car accident. Broadly, we can group it as one cluster of symptoms that are caused because of the memories that keep constantly coming up. And these can be called as thoughts that keep wandering into our mind, which we don't want to remember. And our mind does try to block it off. It can be flashbacks of pictures. It can be the feelings, and sometimes almost, some people go through a whole reliving experience of, going through the whole scenario again in their mind. And it can feel like it's happening all over again. That's called a reliving experience. And then nightmares, problems with sleep, and people trying to avoid anything that will trigger all this flashbacks and nightmares and reliving episodes, because it just makes it so hard to get on with life. And over time, they can start to have a negative view of themselves and the world and their future. I think I talked too much.
No, it's okay. It's good. Моє друге питання було, які симптоми можуть люди з посттравматичним синдромом мати? І можна повернутися до першого питання і взяти цей самий приклад з переходом дороги і аварією, і зрозуміти, що основні симптоми цього синдрому – це, по-перше, флешбеки, тобто наш мозок повертається знову в цю подію. По-друге, це думки, це те, про що ми можемо постійно думати, хочемо ми того чи не хочемо. Це ці картинки, які мигають у нас перед очами цієї аварії, тобто ми не можемо забути це, воно постійно повертається до нас. Це страхіття, це нічні страхіття, ми бачимо це у вісні, нам страшно спати, ми прокидаємося, ми не можемо спати. Далі це може бути відчуття того, що людина неповноцінна. Вона більше не відчуває себе нормальною, вона задумується, чи справді я можу вести далі життя, чи зі мною щось не так, і як далі будувати своє майбутнє. Тобто група цих синдромів, група цих симптомів і майже завжди присутня при посттравматичному синдромі, і проживання цього моменту – це теж один із симптомів. Тобто ми повертаємося і ми проживаємо його заново.
The other group of symptoms for post-traumatic stress disorder is what those triggers, we call it triggers, do to our body, how we feel inside. So very often you find the other group of symptoms when people are constantly on the alert for anything that might trigger them. It can be a smell, it can be a sound, it can be a picture. There was a young person who had come out of Afghanistan and was telling me that pictures on the wall of forests triggers their memories because they had to go through difficult forests to get to a safe place. And for people who have gone through the kind of things that are happening in Ukraine, there can be things like sounds. There can be a car starting or somebody yelling in a playground or somebody, dropping something on the ground, a sudden sound, which can elicit a huge response as if it was something else, which was maybe a gunshot or a bomb blast. It can, for people who have had to, keep awake at night for periods of time to make sure they were safe, their family was safe, or while they were traveling, trying to get out of the country, their brain may have learned to stay alert at night and therefore struggle to go to sleep. Sometimes they may feel that they're having a panic attack out of nowhere. When that happens, they may feel that suddenly their heart starts to race, their breathing has changed, and they're not able to control what's happening. Sometimes, they can feel quite spaced out, blanked out, and frozen, not being able to do anything. That is called the fight, flight, freeze, collapse response. I'll just show a picture of a slide so that it makes it easier. These are primitive responses that have developed to help us survive. A fight response is when we are threatened and our brain tells us, you can fight and get through this and survive this. When this happens, people may be irritable, get angry really quickly, and it can spiral out of control. Sometimes people may not even remember what they said or did when they are in that state because they have gone into a survival mode and their brain has been focusing on surviving, not on making memories. So when somebody goes into that state, they can be physically quite strong as well. And it can be really hard for people around them to contain it. Once they have come off the response, then if they remember or if they have an understanding of what happened, they may feel very, very bad about what happened. Sometimes people can go into flight response. That is when the brain tells us you are under threat and you can't fight your way out, but you've got to run and run really quickly to survive. And sometimes when people get into this response, they may actually run. They may run away from where they are. Sometimes if they are stuck in a place that they are really desperate to run, but they can't, like say you're in a meeting and you are wanting to run away because something has triggered you, but you can't run, then you get a panic attack. When that happens, people say, my heart is going so fast, I'm struggling to breathe, I feel faint, and yeah, sometimes they say, I have chest pain because of how they're feeling on the inside. Some people sweat as well when that happens. That condition, the flight response, is like, it's like revving up your car. The panic attack is like revving up your car in the garage. The engine is running, but it can't get out. And then is the freeze response. The freeze response is when our brain tells us this condition, this situation is extreme, your danger is extreme, you cannot fight and escape, you cannot run away and escape. So I'm going to shut down the body so that you have either less pain or you kind of shut down, save all your energy to get through this period and then hopefully escape, survive. When this happens, when the freeze or collapse response happens, our body actually starts to shut down. We can feel really tired. We can feel numb. We can feel frozen as if we can't move, and it can be really hard to do anything. Our mind can also go blank. When the fight and flight response happens, our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up, our breathing becomes shallow and rapid. When the freeze response happens, the opposite is what goes on in our body. Our heart rate goes down, our blood pressure goes down, and sometimes people can feel faint or they do actually faint and collapse. There is another important thing to understand about the stress response. It's called dissociation. Dissociation is a state of mind when we disconnect with the external world. Sometimes it may make us feel as if the environment around us is not quite real, or sometimes we may feel that we are really not feeling quite real and in touch with ourselves. We may feel like we are kind of doing things automatically without thinking about it. And we may feel quite disconnected. We may feel tired. We may feel sleepy. All these responses are on what is called a continuum. They take us from calm states of mind through different stages to an extreme state of fear or terror. The model I'm showing on my screen has been developed by another child psychiatrist called Dr. Bruce Perry. And what he says is that from calm states of mind, we can go into little more stress states, which is called arousal, and then a little more alarm, and then into fear and terror. And with each state, our brain function becomes different. When we are calm, that's when we function at our best. Our top brain is fully open to function, and our bottom brain, where the stress response sits, it's like idling, on idling mode. If we think of the brain as an upside down triangle, then it will look like an upside down triangle which is intact in calm states. But as our stress response starts to pick up, the top brain starts to shut down slowly, like I'm showing with my hands, and the lower brain starts to become more and more active. Sometimes we can go from calm slowly to alarm states, fear states, terror states, and the shutdown is slow. When that happens, a slower shutdown, if there is something that can help us to put brakes on it and open up our brain again and start to feel calm again, then we recover our brain function. That kind of slow shutdown can happen sometimes when, people are caught in who have a sensitized stress response, when they are caught sometimes in a crowd and they are uncomfortable being in a crowd. So slowly, it can start shutting down in those kind of scenarios. I've just shown a picture of what I'm trying to show and say, show with my hands and say, when there is a slow shutdown, say if that person was in a bus and the bus stop came and they got out, they will start to feel better again. Sometimes there can be somebody who had been through bomb blasts and gunshots. They are in a safe place now, but they hear a sudden sound, and their brain may go from calm states to very quick shutdown real fast. Does that kind of help to understand what happens when our stress response is triggered?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, Dr. Dennis said that was very, very informative. As a matter of fact, as you were speaking, I remember going through some of these things myself when my husband passed away, along with my children. Now, all of the symptomologies that you've spoken about earlier, I believe they may have been referenced to adults. Are there different symptoms for children?
Certainly, because we must remember that adults have a fully formed brain and children have developing brains. So it will be useful to understand a little bit of how the brain develops to understand the response to that question. You see, the brain develops bottom up. And so when we're talking about adults, now in adults, there can be individual differences depending on how their brain developed in childhood. So what kind of sensitization it went through the periods of development for them to reach adulthood. But the biggest difference is that adults have a fully formed cortex. And the cortex, if we think of the brain as a car, the cortex is what has the brakes. That's our top brain. The lower brain is like the accelerator. When adults have PTSD symptoms, even with a fully formed cortex, their brakes is still struggling to control the accelerator. And all our cortical connections, the way our top brains work is not going to be the same. It will go back to the experiences we lived through, and that will be how much our top brain is going to control our lower brain. Now, when it comes to children, the brain, like I said, develops from the lower part to the higher part, that's bottom up. So the part that develops well to help us to survive when we are born, that is the part that develops in pregnancy, that is the brainstem, the lowermost part of the brain. This is the part that controls things like our heart rate, our breathing, how our body temperature is regulated, those core functions. That means that when a mother is pregnant, if she is living through stress, then it's quite possible that is going to have an effect on how the brainstem of the baby adapts to survival. Now, soon after we are born, a little of the higher centers start to develop more. These centers control or fine-tune movement, emotions. And if you think of a baby, that's kind of what is happening in the baby's life. Their emotions are getting fine-tuned. They're learning to move. And that is when the part that is a little higher up starts to develop more. So when a child and their family, usually people experience stuff as families. So when a child and their family go through difficult experiences in that stage of life, then any of the functions that these parts of the brain have to do can be affected. So you could have problems with eating, sleeping, problems in balancing, moving properly, problems in bowel, bladder control, a number of sometimes problems with speech. It can be anything that these parts of the brain play a role in. And then as the child grows older, other higher centers develop. And as each center develops, if they are experiencing stress at that point in time, the functions of those centers will also be affected to that extent. The other thing is, as each part develops, the effect of stress on that part doesn't stay only in that part, it influences the higher parts. That's because the lower parts have to send signals to the higher parts to develop. And all these signals are going to be what the lower part of the brain learned from the experience of stress that it has gone through. So in children, what this can look like is, if we go back to this stress response system, one of the things in children is it can have physical manifestations apart from this. By physical things, I mean, there can be speech delay, there can be a delay in walking, and there can be problems with bedwetting, there can be problems with soiling. There can be, usually these children tend to have more conditions like eczema, asthma. So there can be a number of physical stuff that's going on there as well. And sometimes you get children struggling with their movements. They're not able to hold a pen or pencil properly. They're not able to color properly. They're not able to button up or zip up or tie their shoelaces. So all these are brain functions that are also located in the lower parts of the brain. Now, when it comes to behavior, that's why I put this slide up. This will help us to understand how the behavior can be seen in a child when the child goes from calm states to alarm, fear, terror states. The fight, flight, and freeze response, the way they work, it's not one singled out at one point in time. You can go in and out of those responses quite rapidly and stay in some for longer periods of time and have a mixture of some responses at the same time. When a child is in this heightened or aroused states of the fight, flight, and freeze, they can, when they're just slightly heightened, they can be very, what we call, vigilant. They will be sitting in a room, but their whole attention will be on what's happening around them. You can often see their eyes darting very quickly to scan the environment. They will be the first to pick up even small movements that we may not even pick up. When they go into a higher state of stress and go into a little bit of freeze, then they may resist doing it. They may find it hard to do the things they're told to do. And they may, you may tell them to do something, but they're not doing it. They're saying, no, I can't, or I won't. And if we keep pushing them without understanding that this is a state of mind which actually makes them find it harder to do it, if we keep pushing them, they go into more stress state. And they can dig their heels in and say, yell and scream and say, no, I'm not going to do this. You don't understand me. And if we push them even more, then it can become a violent outburst. It tends to happen, that vigilant, violent outburst tends to happen more in male than in female children. It's also kind of similar for adults. When a child is in a dissociative state, you see, these states are linked. And when we are in fight and flight, we are less predominantly in dissociation, but we are more predominantly in dissociation when we are in freeze collapse states. When they are in a mild level of dissociative state, they try to avoid anything that can trigger the stress response. They may be isolating to their room, not coming out, or, the other things, they may just be watching a lot of TV all the time, or they may be gaming quite a bit. When they are a little more stressed, then they may go into this freeze state where they know they can't avoid it, so they just go into compliance mode. That will look like the child who is in the room, the mother or the father, they go and say, why don't you come out and do the dishes? Come and do some, come for a walk with me, or something good. But the child may not at that point be able to do that. So the child might sit there and say, yeah, okay, I will do it. Or the mother will say, clean up the room. And they say, I'll come back and check in half an hour. They will be saying, yes, and not. But you go back and check in half an hour, nothing has happened. That would have been the child in a compliance mode, not really quite connected, but just saying, okay, to get through that situation. But nothing would have really gone very much into their top brain to think, understand, and plan what to do, because their top brain would have been partly shut down in that state. You see, I like this picture because it shows in colors how when we are calm, the top brain color is really good and the lower brain colors are light to show that the top brain is functioning well and the lower brain is idling. But as the stress response picks up, how the top brain centers slowly start to shut down and the lower brain centers pick up their activation. So when your child has a sensitization to stress from what they've lived through in the past, and when your child is in a mildly stressed state of alarm, if you want them to actually do something or comply with what you are wanting them to do, the way to do it is to first help them to calm down. Before they calm down, if we push them, then they are at risk of going from this state into this extreme state. The problem is we may also be frustrated to some extent by that time, and our brain might also be in that state. And two brains in that state trying to communicate is not going to go down very well. So when a child is in the dissociative continuum, that means when they're pushed more and they have to do something, they're forced to do something that they are not finding able to do, they may tell you, I'm feeling really tired, I'm feeling faint, I'm feeling dizzy, and I'm going to collapse. And they may actually collapse. Children who are more often in dissociative states also seem to have more things like headaches and constipation. Children who are more in the hyper-aroused state, the vigilant and anger outburst kind of panic, that state of mind, they may have more of, irritable bowel. I hope that explains a little bit of the differences between adults and children, Tina. Over time, children can often be misdiagnosed as ADHD or oppositional defiant disorder and a number of other things when this is not paid attention to.
Thank you so very much. And Tanya, since you're doing so much talking, I'm going to go ahead and ask the last question, if you don't mind. Now,
Sure.
This question, I had myself in this position before, and it is, what can parents do to protect their children from the effects of the trauma when the trauma is beyond the parents' control?
That is a really, really difficult thing, Tina, when things are beyond our control, because what actually helps us as human beings, the primary thing that helps us to get through stress and the impact of stress is the buffering of relational connections. And the primary connections is the parent and the family. However, we must keep in mind they need not necessarily be the only connection if the community around the child steps up. You see, a child who goes through life having multiple or prolonged stressful experiences, which the relationships around them can't buffer adequately. The red line is difficult experiences and stress from them, and the green line is relational health. So when the relational health is lower than the level of stress the child is experiencing, that is when the child is at risk to develop problems. It does not matter what exactly the stress is or what level the stress was.
І не так тут важливо навіть, що це саме за стрес і на якому він рівні був.
It can be small things, like small things that happened in the classroom or with other friends, which the child couldn't come home and talk about with the parent because the parent had too much on their mind and they were mentally preoccupied. Or it can be big things like, having been through war and then coming out with some maybe injury and having to go through medical procedures, or the parent being separated from the child for some reason whether the parent is going through medical procedure or the child is going through, even though you love each other, you can't really protect each other from the physical pain, the separation during that time. And sometimes, it might be that there has been loss of a loved one or loss of, you've left everything behind and come. So there is a lot on the mind of adults around them. If we can find a way to bring the relational health above the level of stress the child is experiencing, that is what will bring about healing and resilience, protection. One of the ways to do that is for us to make an effort to be mentally present with our children when we are with our children. For that, sometimes we may keep aside some time to be with our children. We may say that, okay, in the evening, I'm going to sit with you and let's do homework together, or let's go to the park and play together, and be completely mentally present. Switch off your phones, empty your mind of everything else, because nothing is going to change in that period of time by thinking about it, and be totally present with your child, because that can actually change things for your child. However, that alone is not enough. It's really important to be mindful of every little interaction you have with your child throughout the course of the day, which means you might be busy doing something in the daytime and your child comes running in excited and wants to show you something, or they have fallen and scraped their knee and they're coming in, Mom, I've scraped my knee, or I'm hurting, or just saying, I'm hungry, I want something to eat. When they do that, give them your undivided attention, even if it is just for a moment. Even, Tanya, if your child had to come running in and say, Mom, something now, when you're on the Zoom, I would say, stop, give your child that attention. And then you can tell your child, oh, you can stand with me, that is okay. Or if you want to go back and play, that is okay. And then we can continue. That way, your child would have had a good dose of a very quick relational, attuned moment, healing moment. When your child comes to you for anything, stop and attend to your child, being fully present. Don't shoo them away. And the way you relate to your child, let your child know that you are incredibly proud of them and you love them. Don't send a message, oh, I'm embarrassed, this is awkward. When you can, if your child is close to you, pull them close to you and give them a warm, even if it's just a quick, brief hug, a firm, quick, brief hug. Get them close to you. Because nurturing touch is healing, it is comforting, it is soothing. The other thing to do is, the community can step up and fill that relational gap. It can be neighbors, it can be families of hosts who are hosting families who come from Ukraine. It can be the church community, it can be the youth group, it can be a teacher at school, it can be anybody around the child who is able to give that child undivided attention when they are with the child. The other thing communities and people around and governments and institutions can do is support the parent so that their mind is more free to attend to the child. It can be, housing, finance, emotional support, just getting through, knowing what the practices are in the new place that you're in, what to do. So giving the parents enough support so that they can then help the child better. The other things that can help is having structures and routines. They help us to feel safe. It is having structure and routine is like walking a tightrope bridge with some kind of, side railings that help you to know you're safe. Structures and routines also give us a sense of predictability, because unpredictability can be really hard. Very often when there was trauma happening, it was unpredictable, and that would have made it worse. Change can be hard, so give your child as much time as possible to get their mind around a change that is coming up as far as you can. And then comes activities, regular, what I'd call regulatory activities. You see, when we first started, I was saying how the lower brain responds to sensations, movement, rhythm, but can't think and can't tell time. And the lower brain is where your stress responses are sitting and get triggered. So to regulate the lower brain, work with what the lower brain knows and understands. That is sensations, movements, rhythm, connection. Find activities that you and your child enjoy, which you can do for 5 to 10 minutes every now and then throughout your day. Weave it into your day. It can be anything from, in the morning when your child wakes up, you're sitting there and giving them a little gentle massage on the back. That's pattern, repetition, rhythm, movement, and sensation. So your child wakes up feeling calm, comfortable, safe with mom next to me, and it's a good start to the day. And have some moments of connection. You can have music in the background. Music gives you rhythm. Sing a song together. And if you do an action song, you're including movements and music. You can do some coloring together. You can do storytelling together. You can get your child to go on a bike ride or go play on the swings, take them to the park, go for a run or a walk with them. Play with them, get them to dribble basketball. That's pattern, movement, repetition, rhythm. Or, take them outside and throw ball and catch. Take them swimming, do some gardening with them. Get them in the kitchen when you're doing some baking, do it together. These are some of the things that come to my mind, which are filled with enriched in sensations, movement, repetitive rhythmic movements, and connection. Yeah, things like, push-ups, pull-ups, doing weights, all those can also be quite helpful if your child is appropriately aged for that, especially for dissociation. Otherwise, other things that can help also include bear hugs or, weighted blankets. If you know about weighted blankets, or you can just fill a cushion with beach sand or rice and use it as a weighted cushion to put on you. That can make you feel really calm and grounded. And massage, a safe massage from the parent or somebody the child will trust. In all this, it's remember to not do it randomly. The brain does not rewire by random acts. The brain looks for patterns and repetitions to rewire. So do them regularly as far as possible. If you miss 1 or 2 days, it's okay. But as far as possible, do it regularly so the brain is actively rewiring itself. I hope that helps.
That was actually very helpful. What do you think, Tanya?
Yeah, especially the last part, I loved it the most. Actually, each part was really important about the brain development. I directly took everything on my kids, tried to memorize how life cycles were going in their life. And indeed, the last part about examples and routine was really wonderful and helpful. Yeah, this is what I try to do with them, actually.
That's lovely.
And we could see it when they both came and hang out with you.
Yeah, they do it during my work time as well. So I put the headphones on them sometimes to communicate.
Oh,
This happens too.
That's beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Our time, we've gone over time. So very briefly, can I ask you some more things? I think one of the things that I feel so much, Tanya, and you can tell, what you, in seeing the news and everything, and communities are going through turmoil, right? So there's this whole group of community that's there and they're going through turmoil. So what can they do as a community to help one another and the children? When you talk about these routines and these rhythmic activities, can they get together and sing, or what can they do together so that they're there? And how can someone help them start it? If somebody is listening to this and they want to, what can they do? Tanya, you.
Yeah, it's hard actually to imagine where these communities are, but I think really these routines, maybe even the simplest one might help. Maybe really singing. I know my mom is in Holland and they do outings together. They're going for some sightseeing. They're doing bouquets, flowers. So, and indeed this helps. So when there is like order in this community and there's someone who controls it, I believe these kind of outings and sightseeing really help people as well, both adults and children. School also, when the kids go back to school, I think it helps them as well to understand that this routine came back, how they lived before the war.
For me, I think one of the things could be really helpful is the fact of gathering this kind of knowledge, knowing what it had, the kind of effect it will have on you and both your children. Also, you know that you're not crazy. there's a part of you when you like walk out of a room and you not know where you're going. You like when you're under stress, what was I doing that for? Well, you know you're not crazy. There is a reason for everything. And for me, that got me through is my children demanded the attention that I gave them before, and they talked. And so I'm the type of person when I get hurt or I isolate myself. I don't talk about it. I shut it down because I'm trying to figure out a way out of this. That's the kind of brain that I have. But when you talk to your children, it makes you more calm. And so your resolution to your situation comes better. I can't imagine what it's like to be in fear of your life and running for your life with your children. I can't. I'm not even going to be able to respond to that. But I think if you have a moment in time to recognize what it could the kind of harm that this situation can have to you and your children years later, you might want to try to do something. And just awareness of itself, and the more people that are aware of it, maybe like doing dancing and singing. And I watched YouTube. I've never seen so much dancing in my life all over the world right now with people dancing. It's crazy, groups of people, and they're loving it. So I can see how, God is good. He gives us these answers, and they're awful simple answers sometimes. But I would never say I'm in the shoes of these individuals or understand it, but I'm just happy to be able to be a part of a group that's supplying some information about what's going on with you. You are not crazy. You have PTSD, and so do the rest of the people, and it's okay.
And you do have the power and ability to do something about it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. What can churches intentionally do at this time? Churches that are there, churches that are there in maybe Poland or Holland, or what can they do?
I know there are many prayer meetings for Ukrainians where they gather these Ukrainian people as well, and this also helps a lot. They do take Ukrainian children, Ukrainian adults to other kinds of meetings, sometimes outings outside, which also helps a lot. They help with clothes also. Sometimes it calms down people, and also they can choose something for them, and they know many people do this, and it's really helpful. It kind of gives you some relief. So this is what comes to my mind first. Singing together, yes, indeed, this helps too. Singing, prayer meetings, yeah, and Bible studies for children.
Yeah, and maybe youth groups, organizing programs, having some games twice a week, things like that. One of the beautiful things I saw on news was an Ukrainian group singing in the railway station in Kyiv, I think. That was beautiful to watch. And the little girl who sang Frozen when in the basement. Those are just things that people spontaneously come up with, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, indeed. And something else came to my mind, what I saw recently on Instagram. People are in Western part of Ukraine. They are doing every day, I believe, some performances for kids, like fairy tales and stuff like this. And also they gather twice a week to make a painting together. So both children and adults doing this painting, which helps them also give some pattern. They're repeating it, they're gathering twice a week. And also then they're selling these paintings to collect money for the Ukrainian army, Ukrainian people in need. So this was also something very beautiful that I saw recently.
It's beautiful. Animals are the other thing, you know.
Dogs.
Yeah.
Cats. Mm.
Yeah, when my son was going through it, our dog had passed, and shortly after, but he and his counselor kept saying, you know, you go in as a parent afterwards and they talk to you and he goes, well, he needs a dog. And she said it to me about 5 times. And I finally had to tell her, I heard it. We're getting a dog. And it is amazing. And my son is 23 years old. We still have that dog and they are in absolute love with each other. So it is true. Believe it or not, the headache of an animal will be, it'll be salvation to your children at times. So, you know, that anxiety, they need that animal. That's all true.
Yeah, that's wonderful indeed.
Well,
I remember
really
I had
enjoyed it. I'm sorry.
No,
You
it's
never
okay. When you talked about animals, I remember that I had like a cat for 16 years, and it really helped me when he came to my lap, and when he sit with me, and I pat him and I pat him and I pat him. It really is. It helps kind of to release the stress. So that's true. That's true.
Denise said that you're Denisa. How do you pronounce your name?
Denisa, whichever way you'd feel like, that's okay with me.
Okay, Denisa. It was very, very informative. And as Shalini probably told you, I'd like to do this again because I'm sure there's a gazillion things that I missed, but it was very important. And just knowing how your brain develops was important. And then I can understand why kids are so attracted to certain things because that's the part that they're learning and they're really interested in. I really like that. So thank you very much.